Hey everybody, welcome to Battleground Podcast. We have a very, very special guest today. His name is Chris Cowan. Chris is one of the guys that I served with in Afghanistan. He was my second squad leader. This guy, we've been through hell and back together. Lots of different firefights, almost died multiple times. And you know, this will be the 23rd episode of Battleground. And as I reflect on the last 5 months and how far this podcast has come, I started thinking like, man, it'd be cool to like bring guys on that have been boots on the ground, front towards enemy, you know, risking their life day in and day out for this country, and just talk about what that experience was like, and then maybe about what it was like to come home for them, and really do everything we can to use this platform to give them an opportunity to tell their story to the world. And so I think that's particularly important, given that, you know, only 0.4% of this country have served during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's 20 years, longest period of war in American history. And that all-volunteer force has carried a very, very heavy burden for a very long time. And now, you know, you saw the Iraq war end, you saw the debacle and the surrender in Afghanistan, and what that has meant for our troops. But a lot of the men and women who served in those conflicts are now home and trying to, you know, raise a family and make a living and adjust to civilian life. I'm psyched to have Chris on. Chris Cowan, welcome to the show. I love you, man, and it's awesome to see you, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Sean. Love you too, man. And I appreciate you having me on. Also, just want a quick side note. I believe today is 14 years since Jeff Hall got killed in Afghanistan. One of our comrades over there. So just thinking about Jeff's family, and obviously Jeff, I'll see him again someday, but not today. But obviously his family is always in my prayers. So,
man, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, I wear this bracelet, and I'm sure, I don't know if y'all can see it, but it's basically the one that we got when we got in Afghanistan. Really, it's the same bracelet. I never take it off. There are two names on there, Jeremiah Cole and Jeff Hall, and the anniversary of Jeff Hall's death is today. And man, we miss him every day. I was on a radio show with Wendy Bell, who's just an awesome radio host here in Pennsylvania. Actually, she's got a national following, but she asked me to tell a story about Jeff or someone on Memorial Day. And I told the story of how in November, like we had, you know, just for the viewers and people who are listening, like Chris and I went through a 16-month combat deployment in Afghanistan, 485 days of combat, like, which is an insanely long combat tour. And it was hell. I mean, just so many direct fire engagements, thousands of indirect fire engagements, man. Like our base got hit by thousands of rockets. Like it was crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, and so I'm telling the story about Jeff and like towards the tail end of our deployment. And I guess we'll just jump into this now, because I initially intended to start differently, but whatever, we'll go where the conversation takes us. But you know, we were doing this push on one of the main routes from Afghanistan to Pakistan, because we were just getting pounded by rockets every day, and the enemy just lived in those mountains that separated Afghanistan from Pakistan. And come November, now at this point in time in our deployment, we were supposed to go home like 2 months. So nobody really wanted to be going on this like long battalion mission in November to clear the bad guys from all the trenches from, you know, like from Afghanistan to Pakistan, which was like a 10-kilometer area, and each platoon and company and battalion was assigned a different sector. But of course, our platoon was given the most dangerous route in almost all of eastern Afghanistan to go point and lead this battalion operation, be the main effort, what you call in the military the main effort on this battalion operation to clear the enemy from that mountainous border region. And it's funny, Chris, like as a quick side note, like I see people talk about like, when was the last time we've done trench warfare? And I thought like, well, Christ almighty, like we kind of did trench warfare on this mission where they were all laid in these trenches. But do you remember when we initially started the push and all those bad guys ran out from that like offshoot wadi system and started waving their AK-47s in the air. And, you know, we were sort of in the low ground and the Afghan National Army embedded with Marines were in the high ground, covering the high ground. Yep. And because I think you were on point for that mission. And
I was.
Yeah, these bad guys just run out of nowhere, which is really unlike them because you typically don't see the enemy in Afghanistan until they want to be seen, and that's typically when they're ambushing you and trying to kill you. So they're like waving around their AK-47s like crazy people, and then they just bolt. And of course, the Afghan National Army bolts after them, and the Marines are like trying to get them to stop, but they end up getting baited into this like extremely complicated ambush. A bunch of Afghan National Army soldiers get shot. This Marine, do you remember that Marine lieutenant who got shot in the leg and his femoral artery retracted up into his pelvis? We couldn't get to him. He was cut off by 2 lines of the enemy. And, like, of course, we were sent into the kill zone to get this guy out. And immediately we get in there and, man, we just got shot up immediately, right? Like Saint Jean got shot in the head. Gardea got shot in the head. All these guys that were manning machine guns. And like you would open up your Humvee door. I mean, and it was like hitting the Wadi system and it was like straight up on either side. And we couldn't get to him. And so we broke contact, evac'd our casualties, and Jeff Hall was like, send me up the hill with 2nd Platoon or the platoon that was right behind us, and I'll lead the main effort to get him out. And I'm like, yeah, okay, man. Because anybody that knows Jeff is like, you know, he like drinks back then, drank top shelf whiskey, rode a Harley. Like, yeah, send me. Okay, Jeff. Yeah, you want to go get him out? Go ahead. So he led the main effort, fought through two groups of enemy fighters in their lines. Found this Marine, set up a perimeter. Brought in a Black Hawk helicopter, which, by the way, 2 Apache helicopters had to pull off station because they got shot and they had to go back to base. So Jeff somehow gets this Black Hawk helicopter in and leads a jungle penetrator, which is like this, you know, this thing they lower from a helicopter to evac a casualty on the ground. Jeff loads him up, stops the bleeding, saves this Marine's life, comes back down the hill, slaps me on the shoulder, lights up a cigarette, and he goes, "Sir, don't even think of putting me in for an award." I'm like, that's Jeff Hall, man. Like, what a crazy asshole.
Yeah, he was nuts. He was nuts. That was, I remember that firefight pretty vividly. I do remember the challenge was when we got into that Wadi system, it was pretty much straight up and down, and our guns couldn't traverse all the way up to their positions. You remember that? I
do. Yeah, because you have these guns on these turrets that you like angle down, but they can only angle down so much, and the Wadi system was so steep, like you just couldn't.
Yeah, you got to basically get them off the T&E or something, and then so you had like Brown using the shotgun and stuff. It was crazy.
And you know
Windows getting shot out.
That had to be deliberate. I mean, the enemy had to know that our heavy machine guns wouldn't be able to target them in that type of terrain.
Yeah, it was smart. It was very smart on their part. I'll give that to them.
I mean, that ambush, I mean, it was textbook like all of their ambushes, but like that one was particularly sophisticated because not only did they have this like literally like a fire team element that like maybe a football field away or maybe 50 yards away where we see them and they're dressed all in black, like waving their AK-47s, and we're like immediately, because we had been 11 months into the deployment at this point, but immediately we were thinking, whoa, that doesn't seem right at all. Like what the hell is that? And then before we could assess the situation, the ANA had already given chase and they got pinned down. But when you got back into that Wadi, I mean, it was like several kilometers long. But when it was finally over, Chris, do you remember the trench system that they had lining that Wadi system? Do you remember all those dugout trenches that they were in?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, man. It was they always pick the spots where the fight happens, you know what I mean? Really. I mean, I can't think of really any times where they didn't, you know?
Mm-hmm. And like, Chris, this is the guy you're talking about, man. Like, this is Jeff Hall. And so 2 years later, in 2009, Jeff goes back to Afghanistan with Outlaw Platoon, different group of soldiers, because a lot of the guys were wounded, moved to different duty assignments or retired or whatever, or were on their way out of the military, goes back, leads a squad over there, and gets killed by a roadside bomb. It's like just such bullshit. And
yeah.
And this is what I meant by a very, very heavy burden was carried by a small few, you know?
I agree. Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, I didn't intend to start the show this way, but man, that guy was one of a kind, and this country will miss him forever, you know? And I'm sure, and he leaves behind, like, you know, Allison, who is then his wife, and then his daughter, Audrey, right?
Yep.
My God, I saw a picture of her on Facebook the other day. I mean, she was like 16 years old and riding a horse. It's crazy, you know?
It's nuts, man. She's growing up.
She is. And so it's the anniversary of his death. And so we miss Jeff every day. But this is the cost, you know?
Yep.
And so,
yeah.
Chris, take me back to the beginning for you, man. Like, because it takes a very special kind of person to volunteer to serve a country that you, when you know you're going to be going to war. Because if you, like, just for the viewers and the listeners, you know, I don't know, you obviously came in before me, years before I did, but September 11th, we were the September 11th generation. I mean, that happened when we were in our 20s.
Yeah.
And I know that's what did it for me, but what did it for you?
Yeah, I'd pretty much call myself a 9/11 baby. You know, I didn't have any ambitions towards the military whatsoever, or really law enforcement. I just wasn't really looking there. You know, I had done some college, about a year and a half of college. I dropped out. Was trying to refigure my life, and I became a sheet metal worker, and I did that for a couple years. I enjoyed it. I liked the work. I think trades are excellent, and I kind of maybe saw myself just kind of going that direction, and that's kind of where life would take me. And then on September 11th, I was young, but I was I guess God blessed me in some ways that I was running a crew, doing a commercial job on the I don't know how far we get into this, but it was basically for like the CEO of Albertsons, one of his residences, and it was like the top 2 floors of the Make of America Center in Boise, Idaho. And so basically we're doing all the HVAC work up there because the whole place was gutted. We're moving some materials in the morning, and then somebody came up and said, "Hey, there's like a plane like flew into a building in like New York City," and that's like the first thing I heard. I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." And then a little while later, it's like, "Hey, there's another plane that just flew in," and I'm like that doesn't seem right. Like I didn't know anything about tactics or being under attack. I didn't know anything about foreign policy or what's really going. I mean, I was a young, I'm 20 years old. You know what I mean? I don't not paying attention to that stuff, and it's like something's wrong here. Like I think we're under attack. And then obviously throughout the day, not much work was done by anybody. We listened to the radio, and then obviously we gained more and more information over the coming days. But right then I was like, I'm going right now. Where do I go fight? Who's the ones that go fight and kill the enemy? That's just the first thing I wanted to do. And then obviously my family's like, whoa, kind of slow down. Let's just see, what's going on here. But it just ended up being, I kind of waited on it a little bit. I'm like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And then it wasn't, it was like 3 months later, I was raising my right hand, decided to go over there. I wanted to be an infantryman, and I just wanted them to get me in as quick as they could because I wanted to get, I just wanted to get right to it. And that's basically what I did. I tried for I wanted to get a Ranger contract. I wanted to get a RIP contract where I could do infantry training, airborne, and Ranger, but they didn't have any available. So I took the infantry airborne, and my recruiter lied to me. He was like, "Oh yeah, you can volunteer for RIP, in airborne school." So total lie. I know there's been times I think you can, but that was not happening at that point in time. So yeah, I did that. I went in, I did the infantry training, went in with my best friend, Alan Archuleta at the time. We both went infantry. We both went to airborne school together, and from there, he went out to Fort Irwin, and I went to 10th Mountain, and that's kind of how my military career started, basically.
what do you think, like, what do you think did it, Chris? I know you said it was 9/11, but do you think that, I mean, because like you, like I didn't come from, a crazy military family, where every generation served. I mean, I had a couple people that served in the military in my family. But what do you think did it for you? Like, was there anything like deep seated in your heart that, because it sounded like you knew that was exactly what you wanted to do at that moment.
Yeah, because I had never felt like we were in a place as Americans, since I'd been paying attention, which wasn't long. I mean, I was a few years out of being a teenager, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
Where I felt like we were under attack and we were actually threatened as a people. And for me, it was like, that was a no-brainer. Like, it was a sense of duty that, like, I'm able-bodied, I can do this, I'm strong enough to do this, I have to do this for my country. It just wasn't a question. But before that, I just didn't really feel like I didn't see the need, really. I mean, and I'm not trying to talk negatively towards people that join the military when we're not in a time of war. I think it's great, but just for me personally, that's where I was coming from. I just didn't see the point in it until that happened.
I like thinking back on that, like in that era. I mean, because we're pretty much the same age, and I mean, you're right. I never thought in a million years growing up as insulated and free as we are in this country. Like, as I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and Clinton was president, and there was a balanced budget, for God's sake. I mean, it was a time of, I feel like, great prosperity, a very different time in America. And I just never thought like we could ever be attacked like that. And do you remember back during 9/11, we thought that there was a theory out there that the planes were just the first wave, like the opening salvo of a much larger attack. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it was really like intense. I mean, I can remember the feelings. I remember where I was. I know some people, there's a whole thing about some people think they knew they were somewhere where they weren't on 9/11. I don't know if you've heard of that, but like I definitely was where I was. I was in the Bank of America Center. I was working a job. But yeah, we were like, we didn't know. We're thinking like this could be something else could be coming. You know what I mean? We didn't know what was going to happen. You know what I mean? So it was it's probably worse than uncertainty, but it was just very, I can't really find the word for it, but things did not feel safe.
So we get attacked and you volunteer to go to war.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's just, yeah.
And you said your family wanted you to slow your roll a little bit.
Yeah.
But
it was just one of those things that, I gave it a few months, but it wasn't going away. Like, it's just, I knew what I had to do. It was just a sense of duty that I felt like that I owed my country, that's why I did it.
And so you end up at the 10th Mountain Division, which at the time, it became one of the most deployed units it probably was the most deployed unit in the global war on terror. And yeah, man, like, I guess if you wanted to deploy to war, you went to the right unit.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. And I think there's like so many probably untold stories of like what's happened with infantrymen in the war, regular army, we'll call it, not special ops, not Delta, not SEAL Team 6, which I respect all of it. But I think there's a lot. I mean, there's some shit went down. Let's just put it that way. And we were in some major, major battles, and places that, I didn't think we were going to walk out of. More than once,
I know. It's actually, looking back on it now, Chris, I can't believe I even lived through something like that. And I don't mean like survived it, but it just seems like it was something out of a dream. Like, it was surreal, like the times where, you're leaving the wire and you're rolling into an ambush. You just know it. It's very hard to describe that feeling to people who haven't been there, where like, that the moment you go behind this ridgeline, you're going to get attacked at some point by people with machine guns who want to kill you, who don't know you. Like the level of anxiety and adrenaline that floods into your body just waiting for that. It's just impossible to explain. I mean, it far exceeds any feeling that I had. Like, I know that you were a wrestler growing up, and like, I wrestled for a few years as well, but like, and there always anxiety before matches or games, but nothing like that, man. Nothing like that.
No, it was crazy, but there was also, I think we were just proud of like what we did over there. You know what I mean? Like the way our platoon handled ourselves. I think we really were one of the best platoons in the United States Army at that time.
I think so too, man.
I think we did things to prove that we were, we did some crazy things over there.
I agree. And I remember, in training, and we don't really talk about a lot about this, but we trained our asses off before we went. In fact, I remember like lieutenants like getting together for a beer or something when you get off late from work or whatever, thinking like talking to each other like, oh my God, like all of our other contemporaries or lieutenants in other battalions were like going home on leave or going on vacations, or hey, they knew that they were deploying, and so like their command was like letting them off at 3 just to spend extra time with their family. And like in the moment, I thought to myself like, man, those guys are so lucky. They get like, and I agreed with their commanders, like, oh man, that's good leadership. They're giving them extra time with their family because they know they're going to be away. But it was that extra training that kept us alive. I think all of that extra time in the field. Do you remember? Like we were going to the field for like months at a time while other units were just in garrison. And I mean, we just shot all the time. We shot so much.
Yeah, it was like a year build-up, and it was like every week. I mean, it was like, Sunday morning, it'd be like early Monday morning at 3 a.m., weapons draw, 2:30 a.m. You're out to the ranges. You're out there all week till Friday night late. You get a day and a half off, maybe you're right back into it, and just that was just a normal week, not counting some of the stuff we did, right before our deployment. It all kind of jumbles together between the two deployments. But I know one thing I'll tell you is I hated Colonel Toner. I hated that guy. I was like,
he was tough, like, man. He was really tough.
You know what I mean? I was like, listen, dude, like I need a break here. You know what I mean?
Everybody felt that way. Everybody felt that way. And now I look back, man, and we were so lucky to have him as our commander leading up to that deployment. I'm telling you,
he got us ready. The funny thing is like, here's the thing, like Colonel Hackworth said something like, if soldiers are bitching, that's like, things are status quo. They probably that's normal. It's just pay attention to when they stop bitching. That's when you got to worry. But like, we never got past that. But yeah, there was a lot of bitching about Colonel Toner for sure from the Joeys, you know what I mean, and from everybody getting ready for that deployment, and I guess heavy's the head that wears the crown, you know what I mean. Leadership is tough, So
absolutely, and even the lieutenants were like, oh man, this is rough, Again, especially when you see all of your peers going home early, and I look back and I see, in our 40s now, like actually it was real leadership what he was doing, and you hear all the time about like being a leader is about, not, doing the hard right, not the easy wrong. The easy wrong back then was letting people go home early and not get prepped for the deployment, because the reality is, Chris, is many of those other battalions, we took a super high casualty rate, but they took higher casualty rates, and real leadership back then. I mean, I guess the bottom line is that sometimes you're not going to be popular as a leader. Sometimes you might even be hated in the moment. But as long as you know in your heart of hearts that you're doing everything that you can to bring as many people home alive as possible, I mean, then you're doing the right thing. You're on the right path, and that's what Colonel Toner did, man. And like, Yeah, like now looking back with some perspective, some age under my belt, like we were lucky that he worked us so hard. We just were.
It's war. I don't think war is. I mean, that's the ultimate proving ground. That is the ultimate. There's nothing else higher stakes that we can. I mean, what else are we gonna do? Or your life is on the line. Your friends' lives are on the line. You know what I mean? And so to prepare for something like that is going to be incredibly difficult. So the preparation's got to be in some ways harder than the actual missions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which I think it was, except for the fact that when you're actually over there in a fight, you're in the real fight. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, as far as like, I slept more in Afghanistan than I did training, which you should. I think.
Yeah.
Training's always supposed to be harder. Always supposed to push you to the edge. Take everything out of you. You know what I mean? And that's what he did, and he got us ready.
He did. Do you remember, like, God, we spent a lot of time talking about the training, man, but like when you and I get together, I hadn't thought about this in damn near 10, 15 years, Chris. Like, because, anytime anyone asks me a question, it's always about war stories and combat and everything else. But remember he wanted us to run a battalion run. So a battalion, right? Like 800 soldiers, 800 soldiers in a battalion, plus or minus, right? Plus or minus attachments. He wanted our entire battalion running a 32-minute 4-mile run. Now, you might think I know that some of you are thinking now that are watching or listening that, 8-minute miles, that's not a big deal. But when you're running in a battalion run and the pace is set by other people around you and you're singing cadence, and there are 800 people, there's always somebody that's hurt. There's always somebody that's not in good shape or just came off a profile. And profile means like an injury. And he wanted the entire battalion running a 32-minute 4-mile run. And that was his standard. And do you remember we did that? Like, I feel like we were doing battalion runs like every couple of weeks.
A lot of them.
Yeah, a lot of
them. Yeah, because I as a young NCO, obviously I did a lot of cadence and stuff too, and preparing for those things and going out on those runs and stuff. But that's a high standard when you're talking about every single person hitting that standard, not 90% or 80%. We're talking everybody. That's a tough standard to meet, for sure. Even though back then I could go forever, man. I had such a motor back then.
And you're a smoker. You smoked back then.
Yeah.
That was the thing. That was the thing about being in the infantry, man. Like, you have these NCOs that smoke 2 packs a day that will run your ass into the ground as a new lieutenant and do it deliberately, and all while they're hungover, And you were one of those guys, man. I mean, probably.
Dude, I learned my first platoon sergeant. His name was Sergeant Robin. Great freaking guy. He was like from the bayou, man. Like from the bayou were like rough. Like they got their own rules. There's no police force. You know what I mean? It's like you handle it by the bayou laws. You know what I mean? And this guy was the bayou laws. Nails. This guy could run. He could do any infantry thing. The guy was amazing at. He was 45 years old. He'd smoke 2 packs a day. He had Velcro running shoes. He bought them from like Walmart. He spent $9 on his running shoes. And he would pound us into the ground, dude. We were in our 20s. And I learned that toughness from him. Like he, just that not quitting. You don't ever quit. You just go. You never stop. Like that's that mentality that you have to have to be a great soldier.
Talk about that mentality. Chris, talk about that mentality a little bit more, because I remember you telling me about this platoon sergeant when I was a platoon leader, about never quitting. Because I will give you a sense of what I mean is I'll hear from young soldiers or cadets or whatever that will ask me like secrets of Ranger School or what they have to do to pass, and like there are 1,000 different ways I can answer that question, but like what I typically tell them is you just can't quit. It's just that simple. I mean, and it sounds crazy now, but there's going to come a time where your knee is hurt. You haven't slept in a week. You've eaten, maybe 200, 300 calories a day for the last week, and you're hallucinating, and you can barely put one foot in front of the other. And your brain is going to tell you, well, just go back to your unit. It doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to care if you don't have your ranger, if you're not a ranger. No one's going to care. Your career's going to be fine. Your brain will pull out all the stops to convince you to take the easy path, And
right.
So tell me about, like, as a young soldier, like, what learning that lesson meant for you.
Well, I think one thing is, like, had a good example and a good NCO that taught me a lot. But I would see, not every soldier, some soldiers quit. You know what I mean? Not every soldier, I think puts the effort in that they should. But I saw people that would give up, and I just didn't want to be that person ever. I didn't want to disappoint my leadership. I didn't want to be the person that, like, felt like I just quit on it. You know what I mean? So I was like, I'm never going to quit, ever. I think I fell out of, like, one run of his, like, where I wasn't with him all the way to the end, because he could break everybody off. But that happened one time, and I was like, never again. I'm never, ever. I don't care if I die. I don't care what happens. I don't care if I'm puking while I'm running. I'm gonna be there at the end, because it's just like that. It's just that attitude that you have to have. And I think that's, those things are molded in, like, just simple things like training, physical training. Why is it important? You know what I mean? Because, like, physical training isn't just keeping you physically strong, but it's your mind. It's keeping you mentally intact and strong and able to withstand, you put yourself through a rigorous workout, or you're running 10, 12 miles, and you're doing trails, and you're going through bogs, and you're just beat up. You just keep going and going and going. That builds that mental toughness that you need, because you're going to need that when you go to war. You know what I mean? So I think that's, that's kind of what he taught me. Sergeant Robin taught me early on.
And so you did 2 deployments to Afghanistan. So when I came to 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment at the 10th Mountain Division, which was part of 3rd Brigade, the Spartan Brigade. Our motto for the brigade was "With your shield or on it," and so I feel like we bought into that. We believed it.
Yep.
And you had already done 1 deployment to Afghanistan already when you and I first met, and, like, I tell people all the time how we first met. Like, first of all, like, you're probably like one of my best friends, man. But I would have never thought that we would have been friends at all. Like, after the first time I met you, like, I was just a young.
Everybody who's ever been my friend, like, the first time I met you, I thought you were a total asshole. Sorry. You got to get to know me. I'm a slow. It's like, it takes time.
I still think you're a total asshole, and I've known you for a long time and went to war with you. So I'm like, but
I kind of am sometimes.
Well, so the first time we meet, we were at the Joint Readiness Training Center, and that's in Fort Polk, Louisiana, and that's, like, most units go to the JRTC, again, Joint Readiness Training Center, to prepare for what it's like to go to war. It's basically like very elaborate war games, where you have what we call OP4, opposing forces, which act like an insurgent force, enemy, guerrillas that you are at war with. You're on a base, embedded, with a tactical operations center, with mission cycles, all the equipment that you need. We use this stuff called Miles gear, which is, like, super sophisticated laser tag. And so we're down there, and I'm a brand new lieutenant. Like, I literally arrived at the unit, and my commander, like, our commander at the time, is like, you don't even have to go, like, you don't even have equipment, like, but come hell or high water, I was going, because I wanted to go through that training, with the soldiers. And so I ended up going, and I'm like there, and as a young lieutenant, like, you don't really know anything, and you do everything in your power as a young leader to earn the respect of your troops. At least the officers who are worth a shit, that's where they start. They're humble, they listen, and they work hard to earn it. And so, but at the same time, you have to carry yourself with, like, a sense of decorum as well. So, like, you're trying to be a leader that you really haven't proven yourself to be at that point. So it's a really vulnerable, tough spot. And so you're like this experienced NCO. You've already been to combat once. All I knew of you at the time were you smoked a lot of cigarettes and drank a lot of coffee. And And I remember walking up to you. I don't even know what the hell is going on, but you're standing at the entrance to our tent, which in Louisiana in the middle of the summer was so unbelievably hot. Like, and we didn't even have like air conditioning or anything like that, just like swamp coolers or whatever. And we were sweating. It was crazy. And I walked past you, and then you just like out of nowhere punch me as hard as you can in the solar plexus and then you just said to me, strength and honor. And that was it. That was the whole, and like, I remember like almost doubling over. All the soldiers were like in the tent. Lesson. Well, what was the lesson? What was the lesson? I still don't know what the lesson was.
That's right. That was it.
What?
Just taking a shot and you keep moving, keep driving on. You know what I mean? Strength and honor.
So
I don't know. I was dumb.
Well, so listen. So again, for people who like probably who haven't served and are watching this, the Army is made up of officers and non-commissioned officers, and the non-commissioned officers really are the ones that make everything happen. They're the backbone of the military. They're your sergeants. And then you have enlisted personnel, and enlisted personnel, if they stay in long enough and they demonstrate the proper leadership potential, they're promoted. They go to school. They become a sergeant, like non-commissioned officer school. But you were basically an E5 back then, and I was a young second lieutenant, gold bar lieutenant, butter bar or whatever, and that was our first interaction. And so
yeah. Yeah, but we got to know each other well. Like, when we first deployed, because I was our first sergeant pulled me out of second platoon and made me take over the communications, which I hated. So doing the company RTO stuff, and then I wanted to go to your platoon, and then and you did. I think we kind of got to know each other, like working out, lifting weights when you guys would be back from mission. But I would only go out when the commander went out, and I would be the commander's gunner, and I was just responsible for all the communications on the entire FOB, which is kind of scary because like I'm not really like that's not like my bread and butter when you're an infantryman. But
well, you know why you got selected for that, right?
Couldn't hack it as a team leader, so they had to throw me down to the Tomo.
No, it's because you were squared away. Like no one. Yeah. You don't talk about this, but like you were up for Division NCO of the Year, which is a huge deal. Like, right?
Yeah, I think I didn't. There's a few skills I didn't know when it came to like risk doing like a risk management. I don't remember what they call it. Risk assessment. Things like that an NCO does. They learn it. I didn't have formal NCO training. I never went to PLDC. I never went to BNOC. I was an E5 promotable when I got out. So if I would have extended out for a year or re-enlisted, I was immediately going to be an E6. But I literally had the training I had was all just basically real world, like war time training, not, which I kind of prefer it that way anyways, to be honest with you.
But I mean, Chris, you're glossing over like how a Division NCO of the Year is a huge deal. A division is like 30,000+ people. Like, and when you say a division, we're talking like the 10th Mountain Division. So every non-commissioned officer on that post, the super squared away ones compete for Division NCO of the Year. And even the fact that like you were up for it is an honor. But what I'm trying to say is that's why you were selected for company RTO,
right?
RTO, radio telephone operator, because it was just like you were sort of being mentored to do a career in the Army. I think a lot of people thought that you were going to be a sergeant major someday. So that was just like a very important and necessary step in your career at the moment. Unfortunately, for a guy like you who is a door kicker, filling radios and working in comms equipment is about the least sexy thing on the face of the planet. But it's also a huge, huge responsibility. Because if the comms go down, comms go down on a FOB and you're under attack, you're dead. If comms go out in a kill zone, you're dead. Like, and so it's an unbelievably important job that you were given.
Yeah, it is important. It is an important task. It's just something I didn't love. But as far as the battalion stuff, so I'm trying to remember because I did a lot of boards at battalion level, and I think I did some. I was battalion NCO of the month a few times, quarter, and battalion NCO of the year. And then I think I went to the brigade board, and I did okay there. But I think there was like a risk assessment I didn't do well on that kind of guy. But yeah, the boards were fun to do. I like competing, just stuff like that. I think it's put yourself to the test. You're doing the PT shooting, all the other things you do, land navigation. So yeah, it's all infantry.
Wait,
all infantry tests.
Didn't you and I go through our EIB, our expert infantryman's badge training together too? Didn't you and I unofficially pair up for that?
Yeah, we
we just got together.
I was with you on some of it.
Yeah, we just got together and practiced, and then sort of went through a lot of the stations together. And I haven't thought about this until just now, but I think you and I we went through a lot of those stations as partners. I mean, it's not a partnered thing. Like the expert infantryman's badge is it's a really, really, really difficult thing to do. Like there are something like 27 stations of tasks, proficiency tasks, like assemble and disassemble a squad automatic weapon, M240 Bravo machine gun, call for fire and place a claymore. I mean, all of the basically everything that you do as an infantryman, it's like the Olympics of that. Like you're being judged and there's a non-commissioned officer standing there with a clipboard, making sure you do everything the right way. And what is it, Chris? You only get to fail two, but you have to pass. You have to pass everything. But if you fail twice, you're done. You don't get it.
Yeah, I think if you fail one station twice, you're automatically done. And then if you've had 3 total no-goes or failures, and out of any stations, you're done. So you get there's a little bit of leeway, but not much. You got to be on it. And then you have the 12-mile foot march with your equipment and all your weapon and all that stuff and your ruck, and then you got to. I think there was land nav, and you got to qualify expert with your rifle. That's EIB.
Man, so it's difficult, and there are a hell of a lot of infantry soldiers that were better than me. I'll tell you what, that didn't get their EIB then, and maybe even didn't get it later because you have to wait for the training to come around too. It's EIB training. It's not like they have it on a regular basis or you can always do it. It's every couple years it'll be hey, you can train to get your EIB here. Come on out if you want it. If not, you don't have to do it. It wasn't even mandatory. But I think you and I, God, we went through all of that stuff, and I think you and I both got our. I know I did, but I think you did too, right?
Yeah, I
crazy.
I got mine as well.
Crazy.
So, it was my first time I did it. I think I was a private, and I didn't make it. I didn't get it, and so it's something I wanted before I got out of the Army. It was a big deal. It's something I wanted to get, so I'm glad you can definitely get tripped up. It's, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Great soldiers don't get it, just for some little one thing, it's nasty.
And and you might get a grader that just hates you, that just wants to see you fail. Yeah. So there are a lot of variables that make it so difficult,
Mm-hmm.
And especially, and also guys that you're competing with, because if you're, you start getting promoted past captain and even as E5 to E6, you do these boards, and, guys that have their EIB you get more points, or however it is for you guys, for non-commissioned officers. But I mean, it's good for your career to get it. Right. And
right. Yeah. I think especially if I was to stay in, once you start hitting E7, sergeant first class, you're an infantryman, you need an EIB, a ranger tab, I think. I think the one thing about ranger school was, so I obviously never went to ranger school. This is somewhere I probably would have went had I stayed in, but I went straight to Arslick,
which is the grad school for ranger school. That's the
and you're probably going to get some ranger hate on this because I never went to ranger school, but a lot of Arslick is mostly rangers that go through that training.
Yes, it's look. I went to ranger school. I graduated ranger school. It sucked. It's draconian. It's really difficult. But a lot of the advanced skills in the next phase of that training, it's Arslick. It's what is the acronym for? God, it's been so long. Reconnaissance
surveillance leadership course.
Reconnaissance, surveillance, leadership course. That's the grad, what people refer to in the Army. It's the grad school for ranger school, but you went to that, not ranger school, which is crazy to me. And you graduated.
Right. Yeah, so I went to that, but I will tell you, for anybody who's going to go in the military, go to ranger school first. It's why would you go to? It's just one of those things where because you're gonna see the hell they put these guys through when they're going to Ranger school. You don't want to see that first. You just need to just go be there. I think you know what I mean. Because they treated us like really good. It was a gentleman's course. So we get there. I mean, they're RIs who are training us, but they're all RIs who have a lot of like former LRSD, the long range reconnaissance, like the divisional detached, like they used to do at the division level. Then they brought it to the brigade level, like when we were in. But those are the guys running it. But we were treated differently. Like, oh, you guys don't need to wait in line. They're just yelling at all the, you know what I mean, like all the Ranger students and stuff, and we're just kind of like, yeah, just hanging out, eating lunch. But it was hard in the way that it was a gentleman's course, but it was like 34 days. It was very mentally demanding. Like you had like a few days to learn like 400 pieces of equipment, like artillery, like you name it. Like you got to name all this stuff, and like they just flash a picture up. It could be any angle of a tank or something, and like you got like 3 seconds, and you got to get the answer. If you don't pass that test, you fail the school. And if you don't pass the land nav is a star course, so that's like basically you get your next point when you get to that point. And a lot of these points are 5 to 7 kilometers away. You can't dead reckon. You can't go through a straight line. You got to use the high ground. You get in the low ground at Benning, like you're in trouble. Like you're going to be beating brush all day.
My God,
but,
that's so exactly
the first
right.
Time we did that. The first time we did it, one guy passed land nav in our whole class. It was like a forced recon. He like ran through the course. The guy was like a machine. Everybody else failed. He was the only one that made it. And the second time around, some of us passed, but it was, they said about every class it's about a 40 to 45% failure rate, and that's with only a few of us didn't have Ranger tabs. Every single person in there was tabbed or SF. And the class before mine, they had said they're 80% failed, 80% failure rate, and this is mostly guys with Ranger tabs. So this isn't, so that's probably the hardest thing I did in the Army was go through Arslick. That was kind of I would say that land nav course was one of the toughest things I ever did in my life. That was really difficult.
Oh my God, the land nav and the star course at Benning is it's just brutal. When you're talking about saying like, first of all, like I sprinted the entire last half of the Ranger School land nav course just because you're timed. You have to get your points in a certain amount of time. And like, you don't want to get like, I don't remember how many points you had to get, but you don't want to get like 4 of 5 points and then cross the finish line, or get 5 of 5 points and cross the finish line, or get back to base like even 30 seconds late. Doesn't matter. You're a no-go.
Yep,
and when you talk about like you can't get trapped in the low ground, I mean, the brush is so thick that you'll have thorns scratch in your face and everything else. Like, and when you talk about dead reckon, you're talking about like you have a point here and a point here. You can't go from point A to point B straight. No. You're talking about like using the high ground. It means looking at a map and saying, okay, here's my point, right? But I also know that there's high ground, there's a hill right here. So I'm gonna like use my protractor and my compass and plot an azimuth from where I am right now to that hill, and I'm gonna get there, and then I'm gonna use that hill to plot an azimuth down to. My protractor, compass, and plot an azimuth down to my point, and terrain associate, get to that point. And then when you get to that point, it's like they're hanging on these little trees, right? In these little metal boxes. And it's like the point name would be like, J6 or whatever, like or something like that. I don't know. And you get the next point is in there. So you start from there to the next one. It's brutal. So,
the good thing about the Arslick one was they actually had points that weren't like you weren't looking for a coffee can. There'd actually be like an RI there and a truck or something. So like, but the points were far, and it was like a 7-hour time limit. It's a day to night or a night to day movement. And yeah, like you said, it's basically all terrain association and like using backstops. The big thing I tell people in land nav, if anyone's into this stuff, it's like use proper backstops. Know if there's a creek going through there. If you hit that creek and you're not at your point, something's wrong. You know what I mean? You've hit your backstop. You know what I mean? Or whatever that may be. If it's a road, if it's anything like that, But
Chris, yeah. So what we're talking about is just during the day. You have to do it at night too, right? Like, you get like
half of it's at night, half is day. Yeah.
I mean, when I talk about looking back at those experiences and thinking it's surreal, like. I do, because like I'll get lost using my Google Maps, like on some back road. And I'm like, how the hell did I pass the Ranger Nav or the Ranger land nav course, but I'm getting lost on my way to Walmart? You know, it's ridiculous.
It's so weird, man. Like Afghanistan, the roads, like on the maps, like the map doesn't help that much. Just they're all different roads. They make the roads change over time. You know what I mean? Those are like what old.
There are no roads. There are no roads.
Yeah.
It was just
it was crazy over there.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's crazy. You go to Arslick, and then, you know, we went through all this hardcore training, which we talked a lot about. We should really divide this episode into two. I should have you back, and we're talking about the training and the lead up now. And we really talk about the deployment to Afghanistan next. We've already been doing this for 50 minutes. But
fine.
So we know we're going to Afghanistan. Like, you know, I meet you in 2005. We do like a year's worth of train up. We know we're going to Afghanistan in 2006. And, you know, we started to have an intel trickle in from the border. But honestly, Chris, it was a joke. Do you remember? Like, we were hardly getting anything. And, you know, you had already been in Afghanistan. I don't want to gloss over that. Actually, I'm going to stop because I want to start with your first deployment to Afghanistan. You went to Afghanistan in 2004, right?
Yeah, it was 2003 to 2004. It was, let me think, it was August 2003, May 2004 when we came back.
So so you come back in 2004, right? And that deployment for you, this is 2 years after 9/11, and by the way, after you volunteer to serve the country, your boots on the ground in Afghanistan, like less than 2 years later after you volunteer to serve, you're in combat, you're at war, looking for bin Laden. I mean, that's always part of the mission. And where were you on your first deployment? If memory serves, it was like Ghazni.
Yeah. So that was a lot of places. It was a weird deployment. It wasn't like our deployment where we had just our area of operation. We were in Paktika. We were in Permel Valley. You know what I mean? This one was weird. We started out, my platoon started out in Barry Cout, which is the most northern place where we had U.S. forces. We had one platoon there, and we were there there was like a few CIA guys there. And it was weird, man. They were doing stuff like people are meeting them in like a tent and stuff, and they're like got a backpack of money, and it was crazy. I'm like a private, I'm like, what the hell is going on? This is crazy, like, you know. And it was just so cool. I'm like talking to those guys. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, I was like Delta. And then
they have like one name, right? Like, oh man, my name's Chester. Like, where are you from, Chester?
It's like Roger.
Like,
you know what I mean? It's just like some. I'm like, all right, man. I'm not gonna ask you more questions. I'll leave you alone. But they helped us out a lot. They were good guys. The people we were there. I mean, we were just these young. You know, I'm a young private. I don't know anything. You know what I mean? So they were good dudes. A few times when like we took a couple like rockets that didn't really land that close, like they'd hop up on the towers with us and like hit some flares and stuff. You know, so like yeah, they were nice guys. You know what I mean? So we were there for a little while. Then we went to like Bagram where we did a QRF for the country, which was weird. It was like we did this for like a month where we're QRF. Like we had one was like called a Karzai extraction. If you had to take the president of Afghanistan like was getting attacked, and like we have to go in and save him and like Chinooks and stuff. So we do all these training missions. We had one was like a vehicle takedown. I think we called it JLO or something. And we would train this, you know, we would like do all the stuff like, yeah. And I would have like the AT4. So I'm like, I'm the one who's going to like take this thing out, or a law. And we actually did one that, hey, this is real. Like we got one, we got a vehicle. Like it was like, I'm like, oh my God, we're going to do this. Like I'm going to take out a vehicle, I think. You know what I mean? Like we get on the Chinooks, we get out there. I'm like, oh my, this is it. Like, go, get in the road again. I got the law. Like I'm ready to go. And like, all right, index, we're all set. It was just a training run. I was like, what? It was just a training run. We did, but in country.
That's crazy.
That's kind of nuts, right? Yeah, yes. I swear, dude. It was.
And they didn't tell you that it was just training?
No.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, what if you landed on a HLZ and there was like, you know, a white and you like shoot.
I don't know, man, but I'm telling you that happened, dude. Like it.
I believe you.
You know what? I'm pretty sure because my memory's fuzzy. I know we were on the bird. I think we actually went up and landed, and we set up. But
I mean,
Right? That's an interesting point because, that was a long time ago, but yes, it was kind of crazy,
look, Chris, things change all the time. Like when we were in Afghanistan, we did like what we call OH&I fires, basically harassment and interdiction artillery fire. So we would have these target reference points and we'd fire like at random every single night. And by the way, multiple times a day, but every single night, random historical ambush sites, just no eyes on our target. Just pound those sites with artillery. And we call that harassment and interdiction because we just wanted to keep the enemy guessing. We never wanted the enemy to, plot in an ambush there or something, or think twice before they did it. Right? Well, you don't do that shit anymore. You go to, like if you did that stuff, it happened. Yeah. So like what I'm saying is like, things change. Our tactics, techniques, and procedures change all the time. And so but here's what I'm asking. Here's why I don't want to gloss over your first deployment, because like you and I got real close, I think in garrison, did lots of things together. And you told me about like your first experience with death on that first deployment, right? And you got blown up as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I didn't take any shrapnel, but I thought I was dead. Yeah. First deployment for us, it was, to kind of gloss it over, when we were up in that furthest north place, Barry Cow, where it was just our platoon. We did have we had an OP. There's like a big hill OP on top. It took about an hour to get there on foot. And my buddy, they got attacked up there. There was like a squad plus size element, enemy attacking the OP, and they're pounding it. And so we got our QRF together. And so we get out, and I'm a private, you know what I mean? And like, just like this, one of the staff sergeants was like, "Cowan, you're on point, go." It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, me? All right, I'm a private, but sure, I'll be point. It's kind of, I thought like an NCO would be leading the charge on that one, but I took us up the mountain. We got up there. We got shot at on the ridge line. We didn't return fire because there was concern about where we were, and we didn't want to get in a crossfire situation with our guys on the OP. But basically what they ended up getting, we got an A-10 on station, and they basically were doing these strafing runs. They did one so close to us. They called it a danger close strafing run. I'm telling you, man, it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life. It's a wall of fire just coming at us, and it was way, way too close. It's just coming in. And I had my head behind a rock like this big, and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs, just like, and it was so close to us. I mean, they got on, we had a JTAC on there, like, stop, way too close. It was just nuts. You know what I mean? We get through that firefight. We ultimately bounced around. We go to Jalalabad for a while, and that was a terrible place to be. It was just horrific. We were just doing like security. That's all we did. It was a really boring, terrible time. And then we went to Ghazni, and then we were doing some more missions there in Ghazni. That's where I got blown up, was in Ghazni. They buried like a 107 millimeter rocket, actually two of them on the side of a roadway. And what had happened was I had gone to Bagram to do an R&R. And so we got to go to Doha, Qatar or whatever for like 3 days and like have some drinks or whatever.
That's nuts.
And, that's actually a whole nother story because I almost got like court-martialed there. Pretty much like, that's a whole nother thing.
You got to tell me what happened. You have to tell me if you can.
I absolutely can. So we go to Doha, right? And you're young. It's like, dude, we want to have some drinks, right?
Explain to people like where Doha is and what the process is.
Oh, just Doha, like it's in Qatar, which is like a country in the Middle East, and there was, we had a military base there, and that's a place where you could go on what they call a rest and relaxation for 3 or 4 days. But since we got extended on our deployment from an original 6-month deployment to 9 months. So some of our guys, they were filtering guys through to get them 3-4 days off and, out of country, So we get there, and I think it was it was probably the first or second. I think it was like the second day we were there. And you take the bus into like the city, and there's a huge mall and stuff. It's a very rich country, all oil money and stuff like that. And so we're like going around the mall and stuff. I'm buying Cuban cigars and all these things. And so we stop at one of the, it was like they, had one of the bars in the mall. So we just kind of hold up there, and we had, we probably had 7, 8 drinks. Nothing got crazy. We were having drinks.
Isn't Qatar a dry country though?
Yeah, it is. But they have, it's just like anything else. When there's foreigners coming in, they have like places where you can go. They still have bars and things like that.
Interesting.
They still sell alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been there.
Yeah. So like the Air Force people, they're totally like, oh yeah, we do it all the time. We're pilots and do this stuff. And it's like, but for us, we're like under different rules. You know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
You know what I mean? Like we're under like the infantry. Like you're lucky you're even on an Air Force base. You
I know.
Piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like don't even look me in the face. You know what I mean? You're like, for infantry people, where do you smoke? It's about 2 miles down that way. You know what I mean? Like, okay. So we get on the bus, and some idiot doesn't show up. He's not on the bus. And like the MPs are like, what the hell is going on? So now they're looking for this guy. And we're like sitting there for hours. Eventually, they find this guy, bring him back. He's been drinking. The guy's like gone. He's like almost passed out or something. They bring us all, and the MP gets on the bus, and like he's like, has anybody been drinking? We're going to breathalyze everybody. And I'm like, oh my God. Like what? Like, that's great. Cool. I'm like, I think I just gotten like my E4. I just became a specialist. I'm like, oh, that's done. So going down to E1 now. This will be
Well, explain to people why, like, you're not allowed to drink in country. It's a violation of what, right? Like General Order Number 1.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or were you allowed to drink when you were there?
You were allowed to drink on the post. You had like 3 beer tickets a day, which for an infantryman is an absolute joke. It's not nearly enough beers for us. So
it is kind of a joke. Especially you're going to send guys home. Yeah. Like you're going to send guys over there for rest and relaxation, and only coming from a war zone, they only have 3 light beers. In World War II, as tough as those guys had it, those guys went through hell on in the European front. At least they were rotating back to London where they could drink and go to bars and all this other stuff. And they're sending you to Qatar. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. So long story short, I was like, dude, we're smoked. Like, and the guy's like, listen, if you had drinks, just tell me now. And like we'll deal with it, but you got to be honest with me. So I was, okay, yeah, you know what I mean? Bad idea. So they're like, we're going for the, he's like, you're going for the sergeant major of CENTCOM tomorrow at 0900 out. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm in so much trouble. And then we sit there for a while, and for an hour, and then these guys talk just 3 times, and they're like, all right, you're all set. Just don't do it again. And we're like, seriously? Like, yeah, you can go. And they just let us go. And that was it. Well, just scared the hell out of us, and then just let us go. And that was it.
It wasn't even. This is what frustrates me about the Army sometimes. Like one jackass does something stupid, and then commanders basically say, "Okay, now everybody can't do it," or now everybody gets in trouble.
Right. Yeah, that's what's tough about the infantry world. You know what I mean? It was always like that. Like when we go to Kyrgyzstan or whatever, like everybody in the Air Force could drink and stuff.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
Not us.
I mean, it's
Army people.
It's so crazy. You talk about because now Air Force, Army, Marines, all these jokes, but there really is a difference. In many cases, they have pilots that need to have their rest and they need to get X numbers of hours of sleep, and they have a whole different mission set, but they're sleeping. I mean, I think the Air Force, and I don't think I think this is true. They get paid substandard housing pay to live in Army bases, and infantry housing is a whole nother thing. It's I
believe it too.
And so do I. But do you go to Qatar before or after you got blown up?
It was before, actually. So what ended up happening is we get back from that, and apparently we had there was some village elders in some village. It was in the Ghazni province, and we go out one day, just our squad. It wasn't many. We didn't have up armored vehicles then. It wasn't we had a couple Kevlar blankets over the side of the truck. You know what I mean? And we go out to the spot. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going out here. It's we're gonna meet with some elders out here at this village. we get there, and I noticed there was like nobody in like the town square, which huh, okay, there's like nobody here, which is kind of weird, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because in Afghanistan, it just seems like when you're in a deal, like there's just people around, someone's. And so we start to get out of the Humvee. It's in one of those cargo ones where it's got the like little tailgate thing, and I was like had my foot on top of the tailgate. I was stepping over the edge, I was just about to get out when just boosh, it just blew up. 107 millimeter rocket. There was a guy standing like 2 feet from it. There was another guy standing right next to it, about a foot from him. And then I was about probably 7 or 8 feet away, standing on top of the trailer, way up in the air, which is like a bad place to be with something exploding like that. And it just completely just knocked me just straight back, and I thought I was dead. I thought like there's no way. And I remember checking my body to see like, am I intact? And I was like, I mean, it rung my bell. I think I got a pretty good concussion from it, but I never got medically checked out or anything like that. They never had me checked out.
I mean,
but
you should have been awarded a Purple Heart for it.
Yeah.
I mean, because clearly, like had at least a traumatic brain injury, which years later, even after we were there, that wasn't even a thing. Traumatic brain injury wasn't even an acronym when we were in Afghanistan, but it is now.
Well, now they call it the same thing as PTSD. Like if you try to do a claim saying, traumatic brain injury or PTSD, they'll just lump them all together. Doesn't even matter for the VA. But
so what happened to those guys that were right next to the 107 millimeter rockets?
So the guy right next to him, he got his bell rung. Pull him out of there. Just grab him by the back of the vest, boom, pull him out of there because we don't know what the hell is going on. If there's anything else, we get a perimeter going. The guy that had been right next to me, he had a bottle of water in his pocket. It exploded. Just the overpressure exploded the water in his pocket. I almost thought that was crazy. Completely just boosh, just blew it up. But yeah, that was basically it. And obviously, like clearly, the villagers like knew that there was an IED there. Like, you know what I mean? Like they knew that.
Yeah.
But basically, EOD, when the EOD looked at it, they basically determined that had it was buried just a little bit too deeply on the side of the road here, and this kind of a little bit of a hill, or how it kind of the grade kind of filters down like that, and that's what saved us, is because a lot of that blast went up more rather than into us, and that's why, because if not, I'd be dead. I mean, you're like 8 feet from 107, dude. You're like, that ain't good. that's gonna rip you apart. It's a huge rocket, huge. And there was 2 of them, so one didn't even go off. So if they'd both gone off, then it's like, I mean, I don't think you're walking away from that.
I mean, yeah, 107 millimeter rockets, basically like this big, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a big rocket, 107 millimeters round. I mean, it's a huge. Big, it's no joke. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are what they were firing at us, like the vast majority of the time, and yeah, they make big explosions. Yeah, it's crazy that you survive that. Everyone survived that?
Yeah, everybody survived it. Yeah. Yep. But it was just kind of and I just didn't know that we'd been there before. I think we'd been there a couple times. Just one of those things, that's what the enemy looks for. They see you stop. Hey, they park right there every time. You know what I mean? That they're looking. They're always watching it. Even our first deployment, I was only in one direct fire engagement, and then they lobbed a few rockets here or there, nothing really that close, not like not in our deployment. And a lot of the stuff we did was like we would go after like high value, medium value targets. Like we would go try to find people that worked for intelligence or under the Taliban and like things like that. That we spent a lot of time doing that, like when we were in Ghazni, and we were successful in getting people like on the most wanted list, and not missions that like probably like SEALs or Delta's going to take on, not the high, but you're just going after people that probably have intel, medium value to high value targets. We'd scoop them up all the time. So.
That's crazy, man. And then you get back in 2005, 2004.
Yeah, May 2004. Yep.
Yeah, so May 2004, and then there has to be a change of command somewhere after that, right? Of 28, because you're in 287, 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment at the time, right?
Yep.
So when was the change of command after you got back? That had to happen. The battalion change of command.
It wasn't long after, and so we had Colonel Pascal was the battalion commander, and then Colonel Toner took over not long after we got back. I mean, maybe, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 months. It was right in that time frame, though, just right after we got back. Yeah.
Okay, so
and then
2 or 3 months, and this is 2004. Halfway through, it's probably like change of command July, August of 2004, and Colonel Toner didn't waste any time. He ramped up, and you guys started training for the 2006 deployment right away, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, this volunteer force, this is just your story, but multiply that by 1,000, 10,000, and that's the experience of people who are in the combat arms, and forces command in the Army, where you didn't even get a year off and you were already training to go back to war,
Yeah.
and
you live out of your rucksack, man. You live out of a rucksack. If people want to know what it's like to be an infantryman, just try thinking about being cold and wet for weeks at a time. Imagine being cold and wet for 2 weeks and there's nothing you can do to get warm. Sleeping in puddles, constant rain. You can't get dry. Your feet are falling apart because your feet are just soaked. You don't have enough pairs of socks. You know what I mean? Like, it's rough. You know what I mean? Just training is rough. You know what I mean? Let alone like actually going to war,
And this is why I think, to your point earlier, when you said, there are lots of amazing stories, by the way, of Navy SEALs and Special Forces guys. Like, they had a unique mission set, and some of those guys were on once in a lifetime missions. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But like, there are not enough stories of light infantry or just infantry guys in combat over these 20 years of war. Not enough. And these are the guys that are, I mean, no joke. You talk about, like, you're in a fighting position, getting rained on, you're freezing cold, you're probably hungry, eating MREs if you're lucky, getting shot at day in and day out. There's no, because a lot of the Special Forces guys, and again, this isn't like a knock on any of them. It's their mission set was very different than ours. But they would leave. They'd go on a kinetic mission, like a high value target mission, or if you're a Green Beret, sometimes you go on counter-terror missions and stuff like that, but like your mission is foreign internal defense, so you've got a small team training indigenous forces, very different mission set than conventional infantry. In conventional infantry, you're just freezing, starving, getting your ass shot off every day, and you never leave. You don't leave.
No.
You don't.
No. And same with the train up. I mean, when you're the train up, it's the same thing. You know what I mean? We did it, Fort Knox, Kentucky. We did that. I think that was before.
Yeah, that was before I got there.
Was that right before you got there?
Yes. When you went to Fort Knox to do a train up there, that was before I got there.
Oh, it was terrible. It rained like every day, every single day, dude. We were just, you're out there for 11 days. You're sleeping an hour a day, and they're putting us up against strikers. And the whole point is for us to fail. Like, they just would, you got to go 6 clicks. You got to, you know what I mean? We're just going. And the only time we slept was when they download your miles gear. They harvest all the data from the battles, and you sleep for like an hour and a half. You smoke a bunch of cigarettes, drink tons of coffee, and then you just keep going. And like, you're just cold and wet, and you just live like that for 2 weeks. And then you get back, you got a day and a half off, and you do it all over again. And we spent like 47 days in the field. The guys that were down there, the subject matter experts, most of them were tab. They had Ranger tabs. They were like, guys, you're basically you're doing Ranger school and you're not getting any credit for it. Like, basically what they said. We had a couple of guys that got done with Ranger school, and they wanted to go back to Ranger school. They just finished and they sent them there. Right? They were like, I'd rather go back to Ranger school right now. This is terrible. Like, I don't know. I don't have any experience. I think Ranger school is incredibly difficult. Anybody who has a Ranger tab has got a lot of respect for me, because I know that's a really, really tough school. So I'm not trying to knock. I'm not saying it was hard. I'm saying it did suck really bad, though. I would have rather have probably just been in Ranger school working on getting a Ranger tab than just train up for us light infantry against a striker. You know what I mean? But
I mean, at least you get something to show for it when you graduate.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I went to Fort Knox once so I could be abused for 2 months. You know what I mean? Like. But yeah, it was a good time, I think the only, I probably have one, I don't know if I have one funny story about the first sergeant I had. Did you ever tell you that story?
I don't know.
First Sergeant Tusi, we called him Tusi. It was like he was Samoan. He had a very, very long last name. I can't even say it right now. But it's like Tusi is what we all call him.
He had like a super high voice, right?
He was like huge guy. Well, he didn't like me a lot because like I got in a fight. So I got in a fight one time, like in Watertown. It was just my battle buddies left me, and I should have went with them. These guys tried to fight me. There was like 3 guys. I got into it with them. The cops got there. I had knocked one of these guys down, and one of these. I got hit with like disorderly conduct or whatever. But long and short of it, so the first sergeant I was kind of like on his radar, but I was like it just was like a really unfortunate circumstance, like being a soldier and like if you're in somewhere like Watertown and stuff, like you got to stay, you need to have your friends with you. But long and short of it was, we were doing some inspections after that, and for like all of our gear and stuff. My cat's yelling at me. Hold on, it's okay. We were doing some inspections.
Your cat's like, don't tell the story. Don't do it.
Oh, you gotta say hi. Say hi. This is my emotional support animal.
This is your. Where's its jacket? He should have a jacket on that says service animal.
We just got that cat like 2 months ago. It wakes us up at like 3 a.m. all the time. It's
great.
terrible.
That's great.
But so he's expecting all our gear, and we got our TA-50. It's like the old TA-50. You know what I mean? Like with the canteen pouches and all that stuff.
Yeah, the load bearing suspenders and
LBE,
stuff.
Yeah. And so. And he's like looking, and my stuff was clean. I cleaned it all. Everything was fine. And he was like, "This is all fucked up." He's like looking at it like, "This isn't clean." And I'm like, "Yes, it is." Like, but I kept like, "Yes, First Sergeant." He's like, and it's a Friday night, and we were like wanting to go out that night, and he was like, "You're gonna clean this," whatever. He goes, and I was like, "Yes, First Sergeant." So he did the same thing to my buddy Boris. We were roommates, and so we get back to our room. We just throw our gear against the we're like, we're just mad. We went out all night. We got back like 2 a.m. We wake up at like 8. I'm like, oh crap, we didn't clean our gear last night. So I just ran. We just grabbed our gear, ran down to the first sergeant's office because we had to be there by like 8:30. And he's looking at my gear. He's like, "Did you clean this?" And I was like, "Yes, First Sergeant." And he's like. I'm like, no, not really. And he was like, "What did you do to it?" And I was like, I couldn't think. My head was foggy, and I was like, I threw it in the washer, which it literally says, like, do not put TA-50 in the washer. Yeah. Like, you cannot do it. And he's like, "That's what those are for. Good job." And like, that was it. And he just gave me my stuff back, and I was all set. And I was like, oh my God. I don't know how I got through that one. That was pretty stupid of me. But yeah. And then the guy who actually cleaned his stuff all night, he had to clean his stuff like all day. He kept bringing it back down, just kept getting filled. So, go figure. Oh.
That is that's an amazing story. Oh my God, that's like every soldier has stories like that, man. That's
it's like a funny, weird story from what I mean.
So I think what we're going to do is release this in 2 parts. So the first part of the episode will be, talking about why you joined the military and the train up and your first deployment. In the second part, which we'll record, either later today or a couple days from now, we'll talk about our deployment to Afghanistan and all of a bunch of war stories, and then what you're doing now as a law enforcement officer. And so, man, I'm grateful for the time that you've given me today, Chris. Thank you, and I'm so psyched to record this second episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
See you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.